Good afternoon, everyone. How are you? Good. I'm going to take a seat because we're going to get some poetry reading right now. I'm playing. But thank you all for being here. It's always good to see people wanting to learn more about the industry and the life. So I recently, as been shared, I'm the managing director of Empire Publishing. Empire Publishing is a San Francisco-based distribution, um, record label services, as well as publishing company. So I headed up for Africa. And I'm also the founder of Masters of the Industry, also known as MOTI. And in my own capacity, what I've recently just done, I'm not too sure who's familiar with what's happening with copyright in South Africa right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. So I recently did a report really trying to detail what's happening in South Africa because it's so important, because a lot of creators specifically don't understand how this is affecting you directly. And this is something that directly affects you. So I'm literally going to be reading just an excerpt from my report. It's probably going to be a 15-minute chat, but please do listen. Please take notes. And there's a code you can scan for free. You can get a free copy. And this is your code for you so you can access it for free. Everyone else has to pay. Yeah, we try. But yeah, and obviously and this is for Women's Month as well. So please do grab your copy.
Woohoo!
And let's get into it, because I mean, ultimately the report isn't the important part. I think what's important is the conversation, and I don't think we're talking about it enough. So with that being said, let's get into this. All right. So imagine spending 9 years waiting to find out what the rules governing your rights are. 9 years. In 2017 of May, South Africa's Copyright Amendment Bill entered Parliament. In June 2026, the Constitutional Court ruled on the constitutional questions that eventually reached it. Think about what 9 years means to someone's career. Someone who released their first song in 2017 could have an entire catalog today. Careers started, hits came and went, contracts have been signed. And after all that time, the Copyright Act of 1978 is still the law we're operating under. I've been in the music industry for close to 20 years now. And here's something I don't say proudly. For a large part of that journey, I didn't really understand copyright either. I was working professionally in music. I was doing deals. I was trying to help artists make money. But copyright, I only really entered that world properly when I joined Capasso in 2018 and headed up the licensing department. In 2020, I moved into publishing at Sony Music Publishing, and today I'm the managing director of Empire Publishing Africa. And somewhere along the journey, copyright stopped being this boring legal thing sitting somewhere in the background. I realized something very simple. Copyright is the title deed to your work. Think about a house. You can live in it, you can paint it, everyone can know it's your house, but the title deed is the thing that says, this belongs to me. Copyright does something similar for a song. It turns creativity into property. Property that you can license, property you can earn from, property you can leave behind to your loved ones. And once I understood that, I started looking at our industry very differently. Because underneath the songs and the streams and the followers is a much less exciting question. Who owns your property?
Yep.
More importantly, do you actually know if you own it? Let me share 2 stories with you. I know of a duo who signed a publishing deal early in their career. Years later, they signed again as part of another deal, and eventually became part of one of the biggest songs in the country at the time. The money starts moving, and that's when the problems arrive. Rights they thought they were dealing with had already been assigned years earlier. A legal fight followed. But here's the part I've never forgotten. When that original agreement was raised with them, they didn't even remember signing it. And I understand that. You're young, you're excited, somebody finally believes in you. There's a contract in front of you. Maybe there's an advance, so you sign. and then you go back to making music. 5 years later, you've even forgotten that meeting, but the contract hasn't. The contract remembers exactly what you agreed to, even when you don't. And I don't tell that story because somebody has to be a villain. Sometimes nobody is. Somebody signed something they didn't fully understand, and the document doesn't care. Now, on the other side, in 2020, I joined Sony Music Publishing ahead of A&R for Africa. There was a songwriter and performer I'd known since my Capacitor days. She became part of a record that turned into a global phenomenon. And suddenly, the publishing attached to that song became incredibly important. When it came time for her to do a publishing deal, there was a negotiation. There was paperwork. There was clarity about what was being dealt with. I know because I was there when the deal was signed. And years later, those rights are still capable of working for her. And that's the thing about ownership. The moment passes, the hype passes, the song doesn't necessarily stop earning. All in the same industry, but two different stories. And somewhere between them is a question I've spent the last few weeks asking online. Do you know what you own? Now I want to give you a number. If you forget every legal thing I've just mentioned today, remember this: 79,685. Around every distribution, Capasso makes information available about works it has been unable to identify, so right holders can recognize works and claims. The 2016 June list I examined contained 79,685 titles. And here's the important part. The extract itself is capped at 80,000. So that isn't necessarily the total universe of unmatched works. It's what that particular list can show us, and it's full. Now look underneath the number. More than 1 in 8 entries had no writer identified. Around 2/3 had no recording identifier. Some had been sitting there, first flagged and unidentified, for over a decade. Think about what that means. The music exists. It has entered the system, but somehow between the creation and payment, information is missing. A writer, a code, a registration, and suddenly this boring admin stuff doesn't feel boring anymore, because money can't pay someone it can't find.
Yes.
That's why I keep talking about split sheets. Nobody posts their split sheet on Instagram. Nobody wins an award for excellent metadata. Nobody comes out of a studio at 2 a.m. going, guys, that registration went down tonight. No one cares about the paperwork until the song works.
Yep.
Then everybody cares about paperwork all of a sudden. That's the half no one sees. And sometimes the half nobody sees is the half that determines whether the money ever finds you. Which brings me back to those 9 years. The Constitutional Court finally ruled in June. Now, there were 3 big fights inside the bill. Let me explain each one in plain language, because the numbers and sections mean nothing on their own. The first fight. The first fight is someone can use your works without asking you first. Right now, if you're a teacher and you want to use your song in a classroom, or someone who wants to make a parody of a work, the law has narrow rules about that. The bill proposed a more flexible system, broader, more open to interpretation by the courts. Publishers fought hard against it. They said it takes value away from its owners, and educators fought just as hard for it. The court said that this system is constitutional. That means it survived. The second fight. How much can schools and universities copy? The bill let educational institutions copy work for teaching, course packs, study materials, in some cases, entire textbooks. The court struck the broadcast of those rules down, not because education doesn't matter, but because they went further than they needed to. They didn't say clearly which institutions qualified, and they didn't properly consider the person who owns the work and needs to earn from it. but the narrower parts survived. A student quoting your work in a thesis, is that still fine? Fight number 3, and this is the one that matters the most in the room. The bill said that even after you have assigned your copyright away, you would still be entitled to a fair share of what your work earns. Songwriters and authors, visual artists, when their works get resold, performers on television and film. Think about what that means. You signed a deal at 22. Maybe you didn't understand it. Under those provisions, that signature would no longer be the end of the story. You would still have a claim on what your work earns. So what did the court say about that? The court said nothing. Carefully, because I've really tried to simplify the story as best as I can. The court did not uphold those provisions. It did not strike them down. It declined to decide on them at all because of the way the part of the case had reached it. So if somebody tells you the Constitutional Court upheld the royalty provisions, that's not what happened. If someone tells you it struck them down, that's also not what happened. The single question this room should care about the most is, the single most question is this one question that 9 years in and we still don't have an answer. And when I started writing this report, I thought that was going to be the thing that bothered me the most, but it wasn't. The deeper I went, the more I kept finding another problem. Ask yourself a simple question. How big is South Africa's creative economy? How many people does it employ? What is the actual worth to this country? The last time our government properly measured that data came from 2008. 2008. It found that copyright-based industries were worth more than 4% of our economy. The copyright economy is bigger than agriculture. Over 400, which provides over 400,000 jobs, and no one is still measuring it. So for 9 years, people argued about what these reforms would cost, who would gain, who would lose. Industry told Parliament the new paperwork would cost billions. That number has never independently been tested. The economic impact studies were still being argued about when the case reached the Constitutional Court. And here's the thing that gets me still. 9 years of arguing about the industry and not the industry itself. Nobody can put a current rand value on the thing we're fighting over. And that's when this report also changed for me. Because I realized that we're doing the fighting, but we're not doing the counting. And if a sector means enough to spend 9 years arguing about, surely it matters enough to measure properly. Because this isn't some little side industry. It's people's livelihoods. It's Africa's culture traveling the world. But here's the thing. Most people in this room aren't going to Parliament on Monday. We're going back to work. You're going to studios, to artists, to creating, and you cannot schedule your career around Parliament. So while the law does what the law does,